Alan Watts identified 8 signs of an extraordinarily rare personality. And if even half of these patterns feels familiar, you belong to a small group I like to call the psychological avant-garde. In his wide-ranging reflections on consciousness, he suggested that a very small portion of humanity develops a differentiated way of experiencing reality, a mode of attention and interior organization that most people never reach. These individuals often spend years convinced something is wrong with them because the culture mistakes their intensity, their sensitivity, and their refusal to accept surface answers for defects instead of recognizing them as advanced modes of perception. What is striking in Watts's view is that these rare people are not merely eccentric, they are, in a meaningful sense, a further step in the unfolding of human awareness. This is a deep invitation to explore 8 unmistakable signs that your inner architecture works at a higher rhythm, and to see those traits as gifts rather than burdens. If you have been told you are too much, too sensitive, or too intense, what follows may finally reframe everything. You are not too much for the world. The world is too small for you. The very qualities that made you an outsider are not problems to fix, but capacities to cultivate, not flaws, but emergent features of a more refined mind. The first sign is an emotional life so rich it sometimes feels uncanny. Watts observed that some people do not merely feel emotions. They are moved through layers and harmonics of feeling that create resonances most others cannot reach. Emotions move like music inside you, carrying multiple textures and meanings simultaneously. This is not emotional instability, it is emotional sophistication, the capacity to travel through symbolic landscapes where ordinary feeling lives. You pick up the unspoken tensions in a room before anyone speaks. You carry the subtle undercurrents of conversation as if your nervous system were an instrument tuned to the subtlest frequencies. Rather than indicating weakness, this depth signals that your psyche is wired toward complexity. You apprehend what the culture typically edits out. The payoff is rich inner life and subtle insight. The cost, unless you learn skillful boundaries, is exhaustion from carrying more than your share of unprocessed feeling. The second sign is a relentless, sacred curiosity that refuses shallow explanations. Watts pointed out that most people live on autopilot, accepting inherited stories and routines without examination. But you cannot help probing. You ask not only what is happening, but why it is so, how it came to be, and what might be otherwise. Your mind is not satisfied with convenient answers. You see patterns others miss and ask questions that disturb fragile equilibriums because your curiosity pierces the comforting illusions that sustain collective complacency. This instinct to interrogate reality is not argumentativeness for its own sake. It is a philosophical hunger that seeks coherence and integrity. It makes you an uncomfortable presence for those who prefer tidy narratives, but it makes you indispensable to any genuine exploration of meaning. The third sign is a kind of conscious independence that is not defensiveness, but achievement. Watts wrote about the terrifying freedom of accepting oneself completely. Rare personalities often arrive at that freedom earlier and by harsher routes. Adversity, solitude, and being misunderstood can force a person to assemble an inner identity that is self-supporting, one that does not collapse when external mirrors fail. This independence is the result of psychological work, building a self not dependent on praise or approval. You learn to stand on your own existential feet. Solitude became a sanctuary where you remember who you are beneath all roles and expectations. Rather than being a gap to fill, your solitude is a workshop for becoming whole. The fourth sign is heightened intuitive perception, a capacity to notice subtleties others miss. Watts celebrated the ways intuition opens doors that rational deduction cannot. Some people possess an intuitive field that reads micro-expressions, energy shifts, and the unsaid as if they were maps. when someone says they are fine but their energy tells another tale. You register it immediately. When a conversation carries a hidden weight, you sense it not as paranoia, but as finely tuned perception. This gift can be a form of active imagination and deep empathy. It allows you to perceive possibilities and problems before they become obvious. The danger is that, without protection and discipline, this sensitivity becomes draining. You can end up managing other people's unprocessed states, acting as an unconscious therapist and neglecting your own needs. The fifth sign is an uncompromising hunger for meaning. Where many people can tolerate shallow goals and social markers, the rare personality experiences a psychic. If these reflections are offering you a moment of clarity or calm, I warmly invite you to support Listening Mind by subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Each gesture of support helps us continue creating meaningful content and allows this community of thoughtful listeners to grow. Demand for authenticity. Watts emphasized that living inauthentically produces a gnawing emptiness. You've likely tried the script, pursuing validation, playing expected roles, and felt a hollow ache beneath applause or achievement. That ache is not failure. It is a signal from your deeper nature insisting that small satisfactions will not suffice. When your life deviates from inner truth, psychological symptoms arise: restlessness, dissatisfaction, malaise, because your psyche will not cooperate with a narrative that betrays its essential orientation. Choosing meaning over popularity makes you an evolutionary catalyst. By refusing superficiality, you compel others to confront their own inauthentic patterns, and that friction, though painful, is where transformation often begins. The sixth sign is repeated, sometimes painful growth by shedding environments and people that no longer fit. Watts noted that psychological maturation often feels like a sequence of deaths and rebirths. As you drop layers of conditioning, you become unrecognizable to those who loved an earlier version of you. Friends and family may long for the person you once were because that version was predictable and comfortable. Your development is not a rejection of them, but a fidelity to something deeper within yourself. Once you see behind the curtain of conventional assumptions, you cannot return to unconscious conformity. Growth becomes irreversible. You can't unlearn what you have seen. This yields solitude and bewilderment, but also the freedom to seek companions who can match your depth. The seventh sign is a transformational presence, an ability to catalyze change in others simply through how you show up. Watts described how two truly present people can transform each other like chemicals, reacting to create something new. Some people naturally cultivate a holding space that helps others access their truth. They listen without rushing to fix. They witness without judgment. They reflect back what is essential. Being in their company can be a healing act, but this generosity exacts a price. The same gift that heals others can exhaust the giver if it is not tempered by self-care and discernment. Highly empathetic types can fall into patterns of self-sacrifice, helping because they feel compelled rather than because they have chosen a sustainable rhythm. The work, then, isn't to stop caring, but to learn the art of wise engagement, when to offer presence and when to conserve it. The eighth sign is a deep, persistent sense of purpose that is felt more than described. Watts often spoke of an inner call that is not about fame or external reward, but about alignment, living in harmony with one's peculiar nature. You may carry a restless knowing that you are meant to contribute something, to express something that matters, even if the form is not yet visible. That pull can produce anxiety if ignored. The psyche tends to produce symptoms when its creative impulse is repressed. The calling you feel is not merely personal, it feels transpersonal, as though your life participates in a larger movement toward increased awareness. This orientation turns private work into a public service. Your authenticity nudges collective evolution in small but real ways. Watts's reflections also come with an urgent caveat. The rare traits that can liberate you can also imprison you if you neglect integration. Unexamined gifts can calcify into shadow patterns, a superiority complex that isolates you, compulsive critique that pushes others away, spiritual grandiosity that substitutes ideology for humility. Becoming conscious of these shadows is part of the work. The point is not to eradicate these tendencies, but to make them visible so they can be handled with care. True psychological maturity involves the wisdom to know when to reveal your depth and when to preserve it, when to lead and when to follow, when to speak truth and when silence serves more. In relationships, rare individuals have an uncanny way of pressuring others to face their own undeveloped parts. Some people are triggered by your authenticity because it exposes their own compromises. Others are able to match your depth without trying to consume or diminish you. The latter are rare but precious. Companions who celebrate your distinctiveness while maintaining their own integrity become co-pilots in mutual growth. Watts suggested that those who have undertaken their own inner work become bridges, able to meet you where you are without trying to turn you into a mirror image of themselves. Across a lifetime, the rare personality often experiences the paradox of influence. You feel both lonely and indispensable. You walk paths few have walked, solve problems others don't perceive, and yearn for connections that honor your complexity. At times you will prefer solitude to company because shallow presence feels like betrayal of your inner life. Yet when you find the right people, the ones who can match your level of consciousness, you become a magnet. These relationships are the soil in which your capacities flourish and where you can contribute your deepest work. Watts held that individuals like this act as midwives of cultural evolution. Through their questions, their intensity, and their refusal to settle for the commonplace, they expand what humanity can be. Watts also believed that what is rare now may become more common as societies evolve. What we call rarity could be a leading edge that will one day spread. That possibility reframes your experience. You are not merely an outlier to be fixed. You are part of a current pushing toward greater psychological sophistication. That doesn't remove the loneliness or the courage required, but it offers meaning. Your life may serve as a template others will follow. To live in accordance with that possibility requires the twin tasks of inner work and compassionate pragmatism, cultivating your gifts while remaining mindful of how they affect others. If these descriptions sound like you, then the invitation is to stop apologizing for what has felt like excess and to begin stewarding those capacities with disciplined care. Do the inner work that keeps your sensitivity sustainable. Learn to set boundaries that conserve your energy and practice the discernment that lets you offer presence without depletion. Become fluent with your shadow so that your gifts remain gifts rather than becoming weapons or cages. Seek companions who reflect your depth, and remember that solitude is sometimes the training ground for more generous engagement. Above all, keep the orientation that your uncommon traits are not errors in need of correction, but expressions of a more expansive possibility. Your intensity is not a disease. Your curiosity is not a fault. Your independence is not a failure to love. They are the scaffolding of a richer life. Embracing this truth does not guarantee ease, but it does grant clarity. Your path is to live honestly, to refine your capacities, and to contribute in ways that honor the inner architecture you carry. You are, in Watts's framing, part of an evolutionary edge, demanding, lonely at times, but profoundly necessary. Own it, tend it, and let it lead you toward the work that only you can do. Thank you sincerely for sharing your time with Listening Mind. Your presence here means more than you can imagine. If today's video has brought you value, a subscription and a like are a wonderful way to help us continue on this journey of reflection and empathy together. From the heart, thank you for being part of this space.